When Olivier Messiaen heard that, he saw colors. Not metaphorically, not as a figure of speech. He actually, genuinely, neurologically experienced colors when he heard music. Specific chords produced specific colors. Specific harmonies painted specific visual fields in his mind. He was a synesthete, someone whose senses cross-wire in ways most people never experience. And he spent his entire life trying to make the music match what he saw. Welcome back to Pull All the Stops. I'm Jillian Gardner. This is going to be a different kind of episode, because Messiaen was a different kind of composer. Let's talk about him. Olivier Messiaen was born in 1908 in Avignon, France. His mother was a poet, his father was a Shakespeare scholar and translator. He grew up in a household saturated with language, literature, and imagination, and he was musically gifted from the beginning. He entered the Paris Conservatory at 11 years old. He won prizes in harmony, counterpoint, piano, organ, and composition, an extraordinary range even for a prodigy. And from the very beginning, his music sounded like nothing his teachers had heard from a student before. In 1931, at the age of 22, he was appointed organist at Église de Sainte Trinité in Paris, the Church of the Holy Trinity. He would hold that position for over 60 years. 60 years at the same instrument in the same church, in the same city, while the world changed around him. 2 world wars, the rise and fall of empires, the entire arc of the 20th century of music. Messiaen went to La Trinité every Sunday and played the organ. He was captured during World War II and spent time as a prisoner of war in Stalag 8A in Görlitz, Germany. While imprisoned, he composed one of the most celebrated pieces of the 20th century, the Quartet for the End of Time, for the 4 instruments available to him in the camp: violin, cello, clarinet, and piano. It was premiered in January 1941 for an audience of fellow prisoners and German guards in the middle of winter in a camp in occupied Poland. That is who we are talking about, a man who composed a masterpiece in a prisoner of war camp and then went home and played the organ for another 50 years. Messiaen was a Catholic. Not in the nominal cultural sense that many French composers were Catholic. He was a devout, serious, theologically engaged Catholic who read scripture, studied theology, and believed with complete conviction that his music was an act of worship. He said it himself many times and in many ways. Music was, for Messiaen, a theological act. The purpose of his music was not to entertain, not to impress, not even primarily to be beautiful, though it is often extraordinarily beautiful. The purpose was to illuminate theological truth, to make the invisible visible, to give the listener, however briefly, some experience of the divine. He had specific theological obsessions: the Trinity, which he called the most important doctrine in Christianity, the mysteries of Christ, the Nativity, the Resurrection, and the Ascension. Time and eternity, what it means for something eternal to enter into time, and what it means for time to end. These are not decorative themes in his music, they are structural, they organize everything he wrote. And then there is the apocalypse. Messiaen was deeply drawn to the book of Revelation, to its imagery of the end of time, of the heavenly city, of the eternal worship of God. The Quartet for the End of Time takes its name and its imagery from Revelation chapter 10. Many of his organ works are drawn from the same source. The apparition of the eternal church, the piece we are going to play today, takes its image directly from Revelation, the vision of the eternal church and the heavenly Jerusalem appearing out of time. For Messiaen, this was not fantasy, it was theology. It was what he believed was real, and he spent his life writing music that tried to point toward it. Now, the synesthesia. Synesthesia is a neurological condition, and I use the word condition loosely because many synesthetes don't experience it as a limitation, but as an additional dimension of perception, in which stimulation of one sense automatically triggers an experience in another. The most common form is grapheme color synesthesia, where letters or numbers are experienced as having specific colors. Sound color synesthesia, which is what Messiaen had, is less common but well documented. For Messiaen, specific chords produce specific visual experiences. He described them in detail. Combinations of blue and violet for certain harmonies, gold and red for others, a particular shade of orange for a chord he used in the Quartet for the End of Time. He was not the only synesthete in music history. Rimsky-Korsakov and Scriabin also experienced something similar, but he is the most articulate about it and the most systematic in how he used it. Here is what makes this musically extraordinary. Messiaen developed what he called his own modes of limited transposition, a set of harmonic scales that he had mapped to specific color experiences. When he wanted to create a particular visual effect, he reached for the mode that produced it. He was, in a very real sense, painting with sound, not as a metaphor, but as a literal description of how his compositional process worked. And when you listen to his music knowing this, knowing that he was hearing colors, that every harmonic choice was also a color choice, it changes how you hear it. The extraordinary richness of his harmonic language, the way his music seems to have a visual quality, a luminosity, that most music doesn't have, that is not an accident. That is a mind working in two sensory dimensions simultaneously. The apparition of the Eternal Church is a study in that luminosity. It is built on a slow, inexorable crescendo, a single harmonic idea that grows and grows over the course of 10 minutes until the entire organ is speaking and then gradually subsides. It is the sound of something vast being revealed. And for Messiaen, it was also a vision, specific colors emerging and intensifying as the music built. And then there is the bird song. Messiaen was an ornithologist, not a casual bird watcher, a serious trained ornithologist who traveled the world, specifically to transcribe the songs of birds. He had notebooks full of bird transcriptions. He knew the songs of hundreds of species, and he incorporated them with extraordinary precision into his music. This is not background decoration. Messiaen believed that birds were the greatest musicians on earth, that their songs were a form of worship, a natural theology, a music that existed before human music and would exist after it. In his later works, especially, the bird song is not incidental. It is the primary material. His massive piano cycle, Catalogue of the Birds, is a series of pieces, each depicting a specific bird in its specific habitat, with the songs transcribed as accurately as he could manage on a keyboard instrument. On the organ, the bird song appears in a different way, translated into the colors and textures of the instrument. In the Book of the Holy Sacrament, the Great Late Organ Cycle contains passages where specific birds sing in specific stops. The blackbird in one voice, the nightingale in another, the skylark soaring above the texture. For someone sitting at La Trinité on a Sunday morning, hearing Messiaen improvise, which he did every week for 60 years, this could be an extraordinary experience. The organ suddenly full of birds, ancient stone walls and French Gothic architecture, and the songs of the blackbird and the nightingale filling the space. He believed the birds were praising God, and he believed that transcribing their songs and giving them voice on the organ was joining in that praise. That is either the most eccentric or the most beautiful theology you have ever heard, possibly both. The Apparition of the Eternal Church was composed in 1932. Messiaen was 23 years old. He had just taken up his post at La Trinité the year before. It is one of his earliest substantial organ works, and it is already unmistakably completely Messiaen. The title, Apparition of the Eternal Church, it is a single movement of about 10 to 12 minutes, and its structure is unlike almost anything else in the organ repertoire. It begins quietly, a single harmonic gesture, soft and still, and then it grows. Slowly, inexorably, with an almost geological patience, the music builds, adding weight, adding color, adding volume, until the full organ is thundering, and then, with the same patience, it subsides. It is a single arc, from nothing to everything and back to nothing. Messiaen described the structure himself. He said it was like a cathedral being built before your eyes. You see the foundation laid, you see the walls rise, you see the towers reach up, and then you step back and see the whole thing, complete and eternal, against the sky. That image is not abstract. It is what is about to happen. Here it is. If that piece opens something up, here's where to go next. The Heavenly Banquet is another early piece, quiet and extraordinarily slow. It is one of the most meditative pieces in the organ repertoire. Where the apparition builds to something overwhelming, the Banquet Celeste stays still as if time has stopped. It is Messiaen in his most contemplative mode. The Ascension is a set of 4 meditations on the Ascension of Christ, written originally for orchestra and transcribed for organ. The third movement, Transports of Joy, is one of the most ecstatically joyful pieces ever written for the instrument. It is on the other side of Messiaen from the apparition, not overwhelming weight, but overwhelming light. And if you want to go deeper, find the Book of the Saint Sacrament, his late masterpiece for organ. It is 2 hours of music. It contains everything: the birdsong, the synesthetic colors, the theological meditations, the sheer technical and intellectual ambition of a lifetime. It is the Messiaen summit. It will take more than one listening. It is worth every minute. 60 years at La Trinité, every Sunday, a man who heard colors in chords, who transcribed birdsong in notebooks, who believed absolutely that what he was doing was an act of worship, who composed a masterpiece in a prisoner of war camp and went on. There is no composer quite like him. There has never been anyone else who worked quite this way, who heard the world quite this way, who believed quite this specifically that music and theology were doing the same thing. If the organ had a mystic, it was Messiaen. Next Friday on Pull All the Stops, Hymn of the Week, we're looking at Great is Thy Faithfulness, written in 1923 by Thomas Chisholm, a man who lived what he wrote. He wrote over 1,200 poems and hymns over the course of his life, most of them forgotten. This one endured. We're going to find out why. Subscribe so you don't miss it. New videos every Tuesday and Friday. And leave me a comment. Did you know about the synesthesia? Did you know Messiaen was an ornithologist? And what did the apparition sound like to you? I want to know what you heard. I'm Jillian Gardner. This is Pull All the Stops. See you Friday.